Have you ever really stopped to think about who decides what you see every day? I mean, who's actually building the reality you experience through your phone, through your TV, through your computer? Today, we're diving into the architects of our reality, from the person closest to you, which is you, all the way up to the massive institutions that shape our world. So let's get right into it. It's a pretty simple question on the surface, right? But the answer? Well, the answer is anything but simple. Every single time you log on, you're stepping into a world that's been filtered, framed, and, yeah, fed directly to you. The real question is, how much of that filtering are you actually doing yourself? So let's start with that first circle of influence, you. Because in this digital age, we've all become curators. We're not just passively consuming information anymore. We are actively, whether we realize it or not, shaping the river of data that flows to our eyes. Now, this slide makes a really important distinction. We spend a lot of time thinking about self-presentation, the image we're projecting outward, our profile pics, our posts. That's our outgoing data. But what about what we let in? That is reality curation, and it's the constant, often subconscious work of managing the information that literally builds our worldview. So how do we actually do it? Well, research points to two main strategies. First up is selective connection. This is the obvious one, right? You unfriend your uncle because his political posts drive you crazy. You just sever the tie. But then there's the much more subtle approach, selective visibility. This is when, social norms mean you can't just unfriend your boss or your mom, so you just hit mute or hide. The connection is still there, but their voice is gone from your feed. Both of these actions build a very comfortable reality that usually just confirms everything we already think. So, curating our own feed, that's one thing. But what happens when someone else deliberately tries to mess with your perception of reality itself? When they try to convince you that what you're seeing, what you know in your gut to be true, just isn't real? And that brings us to a really powerful and kinda insidious form of manipulation, gaslighting. It's a word you've probably heard a million times, but its journey into our everyday language is pretty wild. At its absolute core, gaslighting is an assault on your mind. The whole goal is to systematically chip away at your confidence in your own perceptions until you start depending on the manipulator for your sense of what's real. Ultimately, it is all about power and control. The evolution of this term is just fascinating. It literally started as a plot device in a play from 1938. You had a husband who was dimming the gaslights in his house, and when his wife noticed, he just insisted it was all in her head. This idea was so powerful, it became a hit movie, then a serious psychological term, and then, get this, in 2022, Merriam-Webster's Word of the Year, after a 1,740% surge in searches, it just exploded into our collective consciousness. Gaslighting often boils down to a few simple but brutally effective phrases. It might be just a flat-out denial of something you know happened, a direct attack on your memory. Or it could be an attack on your mental state. They reframe your totally valid concerns as just irrational fears. And very often, it shifts the blame entirely, making you feel like you're responsible for their actions. It's this powerful 1-2-3 punch of doubt, dismissal, and deflection. Okay, so how does this scale up? We've seen the one-on-one manipulation, but what happens when these exact same principles are used on an entire population? Thinkers like Noam Chomsky have spent a lot of time on exactly that. Chomsky pointed out several key strategies. The first one is pretty simple: distraction. The idea is to just flood the airwaves with trivial entertainment, minor scandals, anything to keep you looking over here instead of over there. The goal is to, quote, keep the public busy with no time to think. When you're drowning in noise, you can't hear the important signals. Another really powerful tactic is to create a problem just to get a specific reaction. For instance, maybe you let a crisis like urban violence get worse, or you even help it along, so that the public starts demanding solutions, like, say, stricter security laws that they never would have accepted otherwise. You basically create the disease so you can sell your cure. And here is a perfect visual of how it's done. An image like this isn't just a passive recording of what happened. It's a construction of reality. Just look at the shot. By putting the camera behind the police line, who does it make you identify with? Who feels like the good guy? Who feels like the threat? This angle isn't neutral at all. It's a tool, and it's designed to shape your emotional response before you even have a chance to think.
Okay, now let's bring all these ideas into the digital battlefield of the 21st century. Because today, these wars for our perception, they're being fought with totally new weapons in a space that's been called mimetic warfare. A key weapon in this war is something called the verbo-visual pun. Now, I know that sounds super academic and complicated, but it's actually really simple. It's just a meme where the words and the picture clash in a clever way to create a funny double meaning. And it's that conflict, that little jolt in your brain, that makes the message so powerful and so incredibly shareable. Here's a perfect example. The text says, Putin nowadays be like, all I want is peace. And then, a piece of Ukraine. The humor and the sting comes from that clash between the two meanings of peace and peace. The source material actually calls this a defensive weapon. It uses ridicule to completely reframe a political narrative and expose what it sees as hypocrisy. What makes mimetic warfare so incredibly effective is its speed. Propagandists don't need to invent something new every time. They can just hijack familiar meme templates. I mean, you've seen this Drake one 1,000 times, and they just drop their political message right in. The format's already familiar, which makes the new message instantly understandable and super viral.
So we've seen how our reality is curated by us, how it's manipulated against us, and how it's weaponized at a huge scale. I know, it sounds pretty bleak, but there is an antidote. And that antidote is simple. It's awareness.
So here it is. Here is your mental toolkit, basically summarizing everything we've talked about. First, recognize your own reality curation. Ask yourself what you might be choosing not to see. Second, learn to spot the classic phrases of gaslighting. Third, always question media framing. Ask who benefits from the angle they chose. And finally, learn to decode mimetic warfare. See the pun and understand that the joke is very often a weapon. Ultimately, it all just comes down to this. You can't fight a manipulation tactic that you can't see. But the second you understand the techniques being used against you, their power just starts to melt away.
So the question I really want to leave you with is this. In a world that is practically designed to manipulate you, just seeing things clearly is a revolutionary act. Now that you know a little more about how that architecture of reality is built, what will you choose to see?